As we think of nuns, we think of monasteries, purity, chastity, and innocence. But in the Middle Ages, lust was what drove some nuns. At the beginning of the 16th century, Littlemore Priory was involved in a number of controversies. These included claims that the nuns and their abbess were immoral. 500 years after these shocking events, archaeologists digging in a church in Oxford found the bodies of nuns who had killed themselves out of shame after being accused of promiscuity that wasn't sexual. 92 bones from 600 to 900 years ago were found at Oxford. They were buried upside down as a sign of their shame, which meant that they were outcasts, big sinners, and anyone else who had made the Middle Ages a bad place by being immoral and promiscuous. Most of the people who were buried were women in their 30s. One woman was buried face down with a child wedged between her legs. The people who buried the woman might have put her in that strange position as a sign of repentance, hoping that it would make up for what she had done wrong. When this was found, many people thought that the graves were for bad nuns and had something to do with what happened in monasteries in the Middle Ages, which became known as one of the worst nunneries in history. Before we begin, like this video and subscribe to our channel for more history secrets. You won't believe what I found out about the nuns in Rome's Sant'Ambrogio della Massima. It turns out they were involved in some pretty scandalous stuff, like they were subjected to sexual initiation rites, and get this, sometimes it even involved multiple people. Crazy, right? And get this, even after the convent's founder, Maria Agnese Firao, was removed from her position, other nuns stepped up and continued her questionable practices. In the 1850s, there was this mistress of novice, Maria Luisa, who was enforcing some really inappropriate trysts between herself and the other nuns in the convent. And hold on, it gets even crazier. She forged letters from the Virgin Mary and threatened anyone who dared to question her methods. These shocking truths were buried in the Vatican archives for years, but they finally came to light when this scholar named Hubert Wolff cracked the case wide open in his investigation of the nuns of Sant'Ambrogio. But here's the real kicker. The lengths these nuns went to hide their secrets were just mind-boggling. Man, history can be wild sometimes, huh? Who would have thought nuns could be caught up in such scandals? It's like a real-life mystery unfolding right before our eyes. The mistress of novices ordered nuns to sleep with her. Oh, back in the 1850s, there was quite a scandal at the convent of Sant'Ambrogio. The founder, Firao, got in trouble for convincing other nuns to worship her fully. Then, Maria Luisa took over and followed in her footsteps, arranging nightly rendezvous with the novices. One time, she asked me to lie in a strange position, claiming it could cure illnesses with her bodily fluids. Can you believe it? As part of their initiation, she even had the novices lay face to face and breast to breast with her, but the craziness didn't stop there. Maria Luisa was also carrying on with one of the convent confessors, and they'd use religious excuses to meet up secretly. She even used forged letters from the Virgin Mary to seduce him. And before you know it, everyone in the convent was following her lead, including the confessor who ended up in bed with Maria Luisa. Can you imagine the chaos that caused? Wild times, I tell you. Sexual initiation, rites, welcomed new nuns to the convent. Maria Luisa introduced unconventional practices to new nuns, including initiation rites with a sexual nature. She claimed that her bodily fluids contained divine blessings that could be shared during intimate moments. During the trial, Maria Luisa confessed that the founder of the order, Firao, had used similar methods to pass on her miraculous elixir to both Maria Luisa and former novices. These novices were invited to spend the night in Maria Luisa's cell. Disturbingly, any nuns who expressed dissatisfaction with these rituals mysteriously fell ill and died. Princess Katharina of Hohenlohe-Waldenburg experienced 2 widowhoods by the age of 36. Fascinated by Rome's convent of Sant'Ambrogio, she decided to become a nun. However, her enthusiasm waned when she discovered suspicious behaviors that made her fear for her life. In a daring move, she managed to smuggle out a cryptic letter with a plea for help. Upon uncovering the illicit and controlling behavior of the abbess, she believed that Maria Luisa was attempting to harm her. During the Inquisition trial, Maria Luisa faced accusations of engaging in lesbian encounters, venerating a false saint, and murder. One particularly notable crime during the trial was a ritual known as the Jesuit blessing, which was actually an erotic ceremony. This secret blessing, passed down from the convent's founder, Maria Agnese Firao, involved French kissing and other intimate acts. Witnesses testified that the male confessor performed explicit gestures, including making the sign of the cross on the penitent's throat with his tongue and kissing her heart. During the blessing, some nuns fell into a state of ecstasy while kneeling before the confessor. Sant'Ambrogio, a relatively new convent at the time, started concealing its misdeeds. Established in 1806 by a young nun in her early 30s named Sister Maria Agnese Firao, the organization gained a formidable reputation. Sister Maria was recognized for donning an iron mask adorned with more than 50 inward-pointing nails. Although she presented herself as a living saint, her stigmata were, in fact, self-inflicted. In 1816, the Inquisition brought Sister Maria Agnese Firao to trial, resulting in her conviction on charges of pretended holiness and inappropriate relations with her confessor. Consequently, Firao lived the rest of her life in exile. Despite these events, Sant'Ambrogio managed to continue its operations, although the Inquisition may have sought reasons to shut it down. The convent's clandestine activities remained concealed for over a century, and even after the Inquisition trial, the secrets of Sant'Ambrogio were never exposed to the public. The unconventional nuns of Littlemore Priory. The Benedictine Priory of Littlemore was founded by Robert de Sandford. Between 1517 and 1518, the Littlemore Priory scandals happened. Between the Benedictine nuns and their prioress at St. Nicholas Priory, there were accusations of immorality and sometimes brutal violence. In the 12th century, during the last years of King Stephen's rule, Robert de Sandford built that Littlemore Priory. Henry Hill later showed that he liked the monastery by giving it benefits and paying for its upkeep. Over the next few years, the monastery also got a certain piece of land, and in the summer of 1517, the king was given permission to go to the forest twice a week to get wood. As the monastery got poorer and poorer, the king stopped liking it. Dr. Edmund Horde, a commissioner of Bishop William Atwater, and Chancellor Richard Rothstein went to the monastery when they had the chance to see what was going on there. The monastery was run by the last prioress and abbess, Catherine Wells. They were shocked to learn that when the previous commissioner, Dr. John Darby, went to the monastery decades ago, there were 7 nuns there who refused to sleep in the building because they were afraid it would fall down. Priory, one of the worst nunneries. They left the monastery for a few weeks and came back with Passions, the worst prioress in England. It might not be right to say that the nuns in this monastery were obsessed with or had lust, but that was definitely the case here. When most people think of nuns, they think of strict rules and giving up things that people outside the monastery get to enjoy. This was not the case with these nuns, who did not hesitate to enjoy all of life's pleasures, even the abyss. There was a lot of personal activity there, which made it seem more like a brothel than a monastery, which is not what most people think of when they hear the word monastery. When you think about all of this, it's not surprising that this monastery ended up in a bad way. During the conservative Middle Ages, it was against the law to have a certain kind of brothel or a women's monastery where men could visit and have private relations with nuns. In her book, Medieval English Nunneries, Eileen Power says that the Priory was one of the worst nunneries that has ever existed. She has kept records for the Priory. The main reason for this was a very bad arrest from before. Catherine Wells, controversial abbess of Littlemore Priory. Catherine Wells, the abbess, was a controversial person in many ways, like the fact that she had a daughter with Richard Hughes, who wasn't her real father. She also got drunk in the convent and had inappropriate relationships without feeling bad about it. She used money that was meant for the monastery to pay for her expensive lifestyle. Wells stole Littlemore's pans, pots, candlesticks, basins, Chet's pellets, and fader beds from the common store to provide a dowry for her baby daughter with the intention of having her daughter marry a good man. The nuns didn't have any money to pay for food, clothes, or anything else. Even though she did bad things and the nuns shouldn't look up to her when they broke the rules, she hit them very hard. Any nun who didn't agree with her would be locked in a room and not given anything to eat or drink for a few days. Immorality and accusations. Chaos within the monastery. Edmund Horde, the bishop's commissioner who visited in 1517 and 1518, reported that Catherine was not the only one involved in the scandals at the convent. There were rumors of another nun having an illegitimate child with a married man from Oxford, and some nuns were engaging in inappropriate activities with boys in the cloister. The nuns allegedly beseeched Abbess Wells to forgive Hughes, but she refused, claiming her love for him was unwavering. Furthermore, some of the girls under their care became pregnant before marriage, indicating a lack of moral conduct. Catherine, however, denied responsibility for the scandals, attributing them to the misdeeds of the other nuns, whom she claimed to have punished for their sins. In turn, the nuns accused Abbess Wells of immorality, and she, in response, accused them of the same. One instance involved a nun alleging that her punisher engaged in sexual relations with boys. Despite the tumultuous situation, the nun in question was eventually released from confinement after being rescued by another. This turmoil took a toll on the nuns' well-being, with some seeking refuge with close friends for a few weeks. It was also rumored that several nuns indulged in sexual fantasies with men they loved during their time outside the monastery. A particular nun was accused of having a child with a married man outside of wedlock. Abbess Wells, the superior, was criticized for not adhering to the strict rules she imposed on the nuns, leading to complaints about her cruel and immoral behavior. She appeared interested in both discipline and immorality, causing confusion and concern among the sisters. Additionally, the superior's lavish spending on sinful activities contrasted with the modest rations and lifestyle endured by the other nuns, leading to resentment. As a result of the scandalous affairs within the convent, its reputation suffered, dissuading many young women from considering joining. This situation posed challenges for the bishops in understanding the complexity of the issues and taking appropriate actions. Moreover, the monastery's condition was deteriorating due to widespread discontent and disregard for rules, which led to doubts about its survivability in the future. The downfall of Littlemore Priory and its impact. The event, which didn't amount to much, hurt the Church of England's reputation in many ways. The monastery kept getting worse, money was being wasted on bacchanalia, and the roofs were leaking. In 1445, a visit showed that the nuns were afraid to sleep in the dormitory because the reputation of the monastery was in such bad shape. Wells tried to hide what she had done wrong by telling the nuns to say that everything was fine. After a few months, Bishop Atwater asked the abbess to come to court. She was accused of being sexually active and acting immorally, as well as stealing things that made it hard for the monastery to run. Catherine was fired as a punishment, but she was still able to do all of her jobs until a good replacement could be found. The Kinky nun then admitted that she had never stopped acting immorally for the past 8 years. No one knows how everything turned out, or what happened to Wells and the nuns after the scandal. No one knew what was going on with them until 2012, when their bodies were found buried backward. It is thought that their sins were forgiven by the time they lived in the Middle Ages. Because of how bad the sins were, the nunnery was shut down in the middle of the 1600s. In 1524, she was locked up by the advisor to English King Henry VII. After Thomas Wolsey, the Lord Chancellor, said that the priory should be closed, the priors were given a pension of £6, 13 shillings, and 4 pence. Only one building hasn't been changed. Slowly, the monastery was torn down and turned into a farm. The only part of the building that has been there since the Middle Ages and is still standing is the Deerlick Priory Tavern, which was damaged by football fans in 2013. All of human history is filled with sexuality and different kinds of intimate fantasies. Some societies have had and still have stigmas about how people show how they feel about their sexuality. In the end, little things like that were neither the exception nor the rule. Many conferences were respected groups where nuns did their jobs with respect and dedication. Nunneries and monasteries were once very popular in England, but that time was coming to an end. Worsley, Thomas Cromwell, and others used Littlemore as proof that Henry VIII was right to start a new religious order, start the Reformation, and eventually close the monasteries. In the end, the closing of a Littlemore was probably met with a sigh of relief rather than sadness. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, History Bizarre, for more captivating tales from history.